which device you use, because the thing that's doing the intuition, the thing that's doing the divination, is always the person.
Yeah. Right.
Ultimately.
Yes.
I think what's different about astrology is that the planets are up there, and we know their courses and we know what they do.
Yes, but you don't think they're actually having any causal influence on us?
Well, the moon obviously does.
In what way?
Well, if you go down to any A&E departments, they'll tell you that there's more people come in on a full moon.
Sure.
You know, and obviously the lunar cycle and the menstrual cycle accord, and
yes.
you know, I think there's lots of gardeners.
I mean, the moon has enormous effects via the tides, for example. On,
sure. So apart from the moon, it's hard to see how any of those planets acts on us directly. I don't see that. I think it's all...
Some of your colleagues do, don't they? Some of your colleagues do think there's some direct influence.
No one I know. Percy Seymour, I think, does. I don't. That's not my... That's not the way I understand astrology to work.
Yes. I still haven't quite got the way you do understand it. I thought I was onto something when I suggested something about the time of year you were born, but you seem to backtrack from that.
The time of year you were born, well, that's marked off by the sun, isn't it? I mean, when we're looking at a horoscope, when we're looking at a map of the heavens, the sun is only one factor.
Yeah.
You know, there's lots of factors. The moon is also a very important signifier, as is the ascendant.
There was a joke, a cartoon, which I saw a couple of years ago, where there was a newsreader saying, in a remarkable triumph for the science of astrology, everybody born under the sign of Taurus was today run over by an egg lorry. Now, obviously, I don't expect you to make accurate and specific forecasts like that, because obviously you'd be wrong. But what does strike me when reading sun sign forecasts is how very bland they are, how very general. Yeah. They sort of have the feel that somebody's going to find something in everything you say. Is there anything in that, do you think?
I think what you're doing when you write a sun sign forecast is you're providing a moment when people think about their lives in a more contemplative way. And you're using whatever signifiers you can to give them some information. And I think inevitably there's an element of a riddle about it. You know, like the Delphic Oracle, you end up speaking in a koan, something that people are going to interpret how they wish to. So I think there is an element of that in there.
Astrologers never seem to be very good at forecasting major events like earthquakes or 9/11 or something like that.
That's not true.
Well, I mean...
Astrologers make accurate forecasts all the time.
Yeah.
It's just that most people aren't reading them.
Well, I mean, every time a big event like 9/11 happens, the Skeptical Inquirer does an analysis of the astrological predictions for that day, and they never get it. I mean, it's
well, 9/11 was got by several people. I mean, astrologers around the world looked at the pattern that was in the sky that year and saw Pluto opposite Saturn, and that particular cycle is often associated with terrorist attacks.
Yeah.
It's usually a nasty thing that happens when you have those two planets opposite.
Yeah.
So actually they did predict.
I suppose if you've got enough astrologers, one or two of them are bound to get it, but was there any attempt to look at, I mean, did you get 9/11, for example?
No, I didn't predict 9/11, but I predicted a year when terrorism would be rife.
Yes.
When the spectre of terrorism would be...
I think I could probably predict
You could probably predict that, yes.
Yeah. James Randi, who's a well-known skeptic, when he was a young man, was once employed as an astrologer on a Canadian newspaper.
Yes.
And his method was to take the forecasts of other astrologers with a pair of scissors, scramble them at random, and put them in for so that you know, Libra got Taurus's forecast, etc. every day. And what struck him was how every day these randomized forecasts were published, and every day he was congratulated on how accurate he was by people who I mean, that's what I'm saying, that when you read these things, what you are saying, oh yeah, that's me, that's wonderful, terrific. Isn't that really what you're playing on?
No. I mean, if you're going to just do something at random, like James Randi, I mean, that just shows how little integrity he has, really, to me.
Well, it worked, though, didn't it? I mean, people.
Well, I don't know if it worked. Did people really like it, or did he say that? I don't know.
I only read his account, but yes. I did find it very believable, having read other astrologers. I sort of looked down the column, and every time I said, "Oh yes, that could be me, that could be me, that could be me."
Well, I would be disappointed if that were the case.
Okay.
When I wrote 12 different sun signs, I would be disappointed if what I'm telling Virgo applied to Pisces.
Yes.
You know.
So, I mean, presumably we could, I haven't thought of it before, we could devise a little experiment where we take your forecasts and then give some of them straight, give some of them randomized, sometimes give Virgo the Pisces forecast, etc., and then ask people how accurate they were.
Yes, that would be a perverse thing to do, wouldn't it?
It would be, yes, but I mean, wouldn't that be a good test?
A test of what?
Well, how accurate you are. Suppose
I'm not sure it would, no.
Why not?
Well, you have liberty to try it.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm curious to know why you don't think it would be a good test.
What would you be trying to prove? What would be your motive in all this?
The so-called null hypothesis, the thing we're trying to disprove, would be that you're exactly as good as random. In other words, if you were to do the Randy experiment of taking your forecasts, if we were to take your forecasts, scramble them at random.
Who would you get to read them?
A sample of people drawn in from the street, presumably. I mean, yes, anybody. Anybody who doesn't have prior knowledge of what your forecast for that day was. But if we say took your forecast for last Sunday,
yes,
and we got a room full of 100 people,
yes,
and we gave everybody in that 100 people 12 sun sign forecasts and didn't tell them which was which.
Right.
And you ask each person to pick out the one that most fitted them, that most fitted what happened to them last Sunday. Now you presumably would have to bet that most of them would get it right, wouldn't you?
No, I think that would. I think that your intention there is mischief, and I think what you'd then get back was mischief.
Why would my intention have anything to do with it?
I think intention always has something to do with it.
Well, my intention would not be mischief. My intention would be experimental test, scientific test.
Well,
but even if it was mischief, how could that possibly influence it?
I think it does influence it. I think whenever you do things with astrology, intentions are strong.
Right. So an experimental test that actually was designed only to try to rule out randomness,
Yeah.
that would be mischievous enough to mess it up, would it?
Probably, yeah.
Yeah. Well, you're in a kind of no-lose situation then, aren't you?
I hope so.
Yeah.
I mean, when people have tested astrology before, you know, they've got results. It isn't as if it's never been proven.
No, but I'm offering you a test and you seem not to be keen on it.
I'm not keen on it because, I don't mind. If you want to go ahead and try it, see what happens. I'm curious.
I'd have thought you'd be eager. I mean, I'd have thought you'd want it to be done.
Well,
but if you believe it, you presumably would believe it would produce positive results.
I'll tell you one reason I don't think that, Richard, is because when I write for my readers, for me it's part of an ongoing dialogue. And sometimes you see things that are in the stars and you think, I can't tell them this week after week. I can't go through August telling them, look, it's very tough, you're going to have to hang on till September. So I would modify what I said on one of those weeks. But for me, it's an ongoing dialogue. It's giving people ongoing information. So whether that's the right week for that particular sign to, I'm not sure.
Well, that might have to come out in the wash.
It might have to come out in the wash.
Yes. There's another nice story of a journalist who drew the short straw one week and was told to go away and do the astrology column.
Yeah.
And he said, all the sorrows of yesteryear are as nothing compared to what will happen to you today. And the phone lines were jammed and there were suicides and all sorts of terrible things happened.
It's a really irresponsible thing to do, yeah? You can't tell people that. That's nasty.
Could you tell me something about the historical origins of astrology?
Well, astrology as we know it is probably conceived in Ptolemaic Egypt, around about the 1st century AD, drawing on a number of different sources from Egypt, from Babylonia, from Greece and so on.
Right. And at that time, the signs of the zodiac were identified. What else? And at that time, at least Ptolemy himself thought. Well, is it the same Ptolemy? I don't know
Yes.
what I'm talking about there.
Yes.
Thought that that these sort of complicated epicycles and things. You still use that system, or how does that sort of fit in with the ancient system?
Well, the ancient system is, I suppose, the astrology that came out of Greece, Hellenistic astrology, is pretty much still what we use, I would say.
Right. Now, tell me, what is the precession of the equinoxes?
Well, as you know, the Earth doesn't revolve on a completely level axis.
Right.
It's got a little twist, rather like a top that's spinning.
Yeah.
So the top of the globe is always spinning around like this,
Right.
but it takes 25,000 years
Yes.
to conclude. So as a result, every 72 years, the zodiac goes backwards 1 degree.
Right. And do you take account of that in your sun sign forecasts?
Yes.
Yeah. How do you do that?
Well, there are two zodiacs in use. One is by the Vedic people, which is the sidereal zodiac, and one is what we use, which is the tropical zodiac. So we are measuring off where the planets are from the equinox on March 21st.
Right.
And going around the ecliptic that way.
So do you take account of the present position of the constellations, or the position that they used to be in when the system was
We
devised?
measure the constellations from 0 degrees Aries. So that's where we measure them from. But that's not where they are.
No.
So we're all 17 degrees out.
Right. And does that matter?
Doesn't matter to me.
No.
It matters to the Vedic astrologers.
Yes.
The-
And I take it doesn't matter to you because you don't think the constellations are having any influence anyway, and so it doesn't matter which constellation is where.
It's the planets that are most important.
Why is that?
The planets are in the language of astrology, the planets are the verbs. They're
Because
the
they have
ones
no
that are doing
influence.
anything.
You said they had no influence.
Well, I said they signify.
Right.
They're the ones that are actively telling us things.
Okay. What about the relationship between astrology and astronomy, which obviously moves on in a way that astrology, I suppose, doesn't? Probably like me, you're immensely inspired by the grandeur of the universe as it's now understood. I mean, the fact that this is just one galaxy, huge as it is among many others. Are you sort of inspired by the poetry of that, by the wonder of the universe?
I'm inspired by the poetry of the stars and by poetry itself, which has often drawn on astrology for inspiration. You know, it's been consistently popular among English poets. That's one reason I became interested.
Right.
I mean, astrology is something that has spoken to many of your heroes. I mean, Galileo was a very keen astrologer. Johannes Kepler was a keen astrologer.
Yes, I'm sure.
So it obviously spoke to them.
Yes. And science moves on.